Firstly, and also I don't know, the slides are very beautiful in this room. Very quickly on the motivation at the basis of this work. We see that gender equality is increasingly something that has become salient within democracy, also in relation to gender equality policies and commitment to actually implement gender equality, gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting, and so on. But in parallel, these also going back to another theme that was just discussed, ActEU has become increasingly polarized in these topics. And from previous research, we know that affective polarization undermines supports for democratic norm. That in context of high polarization, we see the willingness, which was already mentioned in the discussion before, to trade between democratic principle and partisan preferences, and as well a relationship between gender role attitudes, masculinity and sexism, and support for radical right parties, often also in this case in a context in which there are critiques to democracy itself. And this brought us to the question of whether those that oppose gender equality policies are also less supportive of democracy itself. And I'm going to glance very, very quickly on the theoretical framework for the same reasons that we all said multiple times now. But on one side, if we look at the opposition to gender equality policies, we can see the privileged status of men within society as a zero-sum game. And from this perspective, gender equality policy can be seen as a threat to existing gender power relationships. And we see opposition to gender equality policies as supporting human rights transgression. And we think that this, for some dimension, is more explicit than for others. But this is something that we very much want to discuss with you, so we put it out there. And on the side of support for democracy, again, with this kind of inherent link that is becoming stronger, the pluralist component of democracy rests on equality, not just gender equality, and human rights and minorities protection as being part of the democratic system. And again, there is a policy component which can become perceived as a threat to traditional gender relationship. And going back, this has become increasingly salient also in terms of policy output. So not just we think these principles are important, but we make policies that support them. And for that reason, we expect an association between opposition to gender equality policies and lower support importance. I put it there clearly because that's what we can measure within the ActEU survey of democracy. Coming to the data, I will focus on the data for the ActEU survey because that's what we have looked into so far. But there is a second component of this research where we will be able to somewhat have a more nuanced view of democracy, because there we have a few more questions that we can exploit. Sadly, then we lose the dimension of policies, which is something that we can do with the data for the ActEU survey, where I will not say much because the survey has been discussed already in multiple presentations, other than we do have a diverse set of countries that for a question like this is quite important. And we look as our dependent variable at the importance of democracy. And our independent variable is looks at the opposition to gender equality policies, and we have 6 dimensions. Most of them, except abortion, are quite similar to the ESS. And we build an index as well that is what we have for our baseline model. This index behaves quite well also once we add abortion into the 6, but we also show you that there are some differences across policy areas. So, coming to our results, what we see is a positive association overall, so considering the aggregate index, but we do see some differences across the policies. And this is something where I go back to the question, what is more undisputably a violation of human rights or threatening human rights when you really deny that these policy areas are important. In a way, where we see the strongest associations, so those that oppose equal pay, are also those that are less supportive of the thing that democracy is less important, is indeed equal pay. And this is an area in which, at least in the European context, there have been many more policies in a way than in some others that are mentioned here, and in which it's less divisive in a way and polarizing to say, okay, we cannot, especially in the formulation of the question, it's okay to pay men and women differently for the same job. And we have some at the opposite of on end of the spectrum, equality in politics, which is something where we know that there is much more of a debate, especially if we think of quotas and so on. But also issues where we could expect quite strong polarization, as abortion. They are there, but we don't have they're not at the extreme, let's say, in this analysis. And we also have countries' differences. That the direction of the relationship is stable across countries, but in some cases we do not have a significant association between these two variables. And also in terms of the size of strength of this relationship, we see quite important differences. Finland on one side being the strongest, and other countries being less, where this is less pronounced. And we don't have time again to go much into the details, and we have not had also time to properly look at the country dynamics. But I think this is something that we keep coming back to. The national contexts are important, and we need to understand very much what is going on, also because when we look at these at the aggregate level, it can be something very different, because in some countries both support for gender equality is very high, and the importance of democracy is very high, and in other countries there could be something quite different instead, that is then being captured by this aggregate position on the index. So coming to our preliminary conclusion, we do see, especially when we consider this multiple dimension of support for gender equality policy, in association between opposition to them and lower importance of living in a democracy. And these holds, we even if to a different extent, across different types of policies, where I put again the question if opposing equal pay, perhaps the most indisputable violation of any sort of principle of equality, and that's back for the discussion again. And this to some extent is also the case across countries. And when we look at interaction, something that is that we found quite interesting is we do not have any gender difference overall, and for most policy area. There is one exception, which is care, where this relationship only holds for men. So we can have that women oppose gender equality, the changing care distribution within the household, but still think that democracy is important. We have not talked more about that. We just put it on the table as this. And also in terms of left-right, this relationship holds, but it, as we've seen often, the caveat is the strength of this relationship is quite different, and the strongest is for the far right. What are our next steps? And I think I'm mostly within time. We need to look much more into at the country level and trying to understand these differences, and also we need to try to reason of the differences that we see across policy area, where the most notable is indeed this one of caring, which really we have something somewhat different, especially in terms of gender differences that in the others. And I was not able to show you much in terms of these interactions, but also there we have much more work to do. And then hopefully kind of trying to already anticipate one of the criticisms that is on the democracy side and how we are measuring the not so forward, but the importance of democracy. We should be able to have a bit more nuance when we move to the second component of this analysis with the other survey.